The mountain man stood frozen at the mouth of the cave when he heard the faint mewling sounds mixing with the howling wind. But what shocked him more was discovering the young woman huddled in the darkness. Her arms wrapped protectively around three tiny kittens as the spring storm raged outside. It was April 1878 in the Utah Territory, and Jonas Northwood had been tracking an elk through the Wasatch Mountains when the sudden storm had forced him to seek shelter. He had not expected to find anyone else up here, especially not a woman alone. The cave was one he had used before during his long months in these mountains, hunting and trapping far from civilization. Jonas had been living this way for nearly 5 years now, his muscular frame hardened by the demanding life, his dark hair hanging past his shoulders, his beard thick and unkempt. He stood well over 6 feet tall, his broad shoulders nearly filling the cave entrance as he stepped inside, shaking the rain from his leather coat. The woman gasped and pressed herself further back against the stone wall, clutching the kittens closer to her chest. Even in the dim light filtering through the storm, Jonas could see she was soaked to the bone, her dark hair plastered to her face, her simple cotton dress torn and muddy. She looked terrified. "Easy now," Jonas said, his deep voice gentle despite his intimidating appearance. "I am not going to hurt you. This storm is dangerous. You need warmth." The woman stared at him with wide eyes, and he could see her trembling. Whether from cold or fear, he could not tell. Probably both. One of the kittens in her arms let out a pitiful cry, and she instinctively pulled it closer. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the wind. "Please do not hurt them. They are just babies, their mother. I found them abandoned in a hollow tree. The storm came so fast and I am not going to hurt anyone," Jonas repeated, moving slowly so as not to startle her further. He shrugged off his pack and began pulling out supplies. "You need a fire, and those little ones need warmth too. How long have you been out here?" "Since morning," she said, her teeth chattering. "I was gathering herbs near the foothills when I heard them crying. I could not just leave them." Jonas nodded, understanding that instinct even if it had been foolish to get caught in the mountains with a storm coming. He had seen the dark clouds building since dawn and had started looking for shelter hours ago. This woman clearly had not been paying attention to the sky, too focused on the kittens she had rescued. He quickly gathered some dry wood he had stashed in the cave on a previous visit, along with kindling he kept in a waterproof pouch. Within minutes, he had a fire crackling near the entrance, positioned so the smoke would drift out while the heat would radiate back into the cave. The orange glow illuminated the space, and Jonas got his first good look at the woman. She was young, probably in her early 20s, with delicate features and dark eyes that watched his every movement. Despite her bedraggled state, there was a quiet strength in the way she held herself, a determination that had kept her going through the storm. The 3 kittens in her arms were tiny, probably only a few weeks old, their eyes barely open. They were orange tabbies, all 3 of them, and they cried weakly for their missing mother. "My name is Jonas Northwood," he said, crouching by the fire and holding his hands out to warm them. "I live up in these mountains most of the year, trap and hunt. What is your name?" The woman hesitated, then seemed to decide he was not an immediate threat. "Sarah Hayes. I live in Salt Lake City with my aunt. I come up to the foothills sometimes to gather medicinal herbs. She sells them in her shop." Jonas reached into his pack and pulled out a wool blanket. He stood and approached slowly, holding it out to her. "You need to get warm, Miss Hayes. Take off that wet dress and wrap yourself in this. I will turn my back. Those kittens need warmth too, but they will not get it from you if you freeze to death." Sarah looked at the blanket, then at him, uncertainty clear on her face. But another violent shiver racked her body, and she nodded. Jonas immediately turned to face the cave entrance, staring out at the sheets of rain pelting down. The storm showed no signs of letting up. They would be here for a while. He heard the rustle of wet fabric behind him, a soft gasp as she peeled the cold dress from her skin, then the sound of her wrapping herself in the blanket. "Thank you," she said quietly. "You can turn around now." Jonas turned to find her sitting closer to the fire, the blanket wrapped tightly around her shoulders. She had laid her dress out on a rock to dry. The kittens were nestled in her lap, and she was trying to warm them with her hands. They had stopped crying, but they looked weak. "They need milk," Jonas said, settling down across the fire from her. "Their mother probably got killed by a predator or died some other way. Without her, they will not last long." "I know," Sarah said, her voice thick with emotion, "but I could not leave them. When I found them, they were crying so desperately. I thought maybe I could get them back to town, find someone with a nursing cat or make some kind of substitute milk." Jonas studied her face in the firelight. Most people would not have risked themselves for a few stray kittens, but she had. There was something admirable about that, even if it had been reckless. "The storm will probably last through the night," he said. "Tomorrow morning, if it clears, I can guide you back down to the valley. It is dangerous country if you do not know it well." "I am sorry to be such trouble," Sarah said, looking down at the kittens. "I thought I knew the area well enough, but I got turned around in the rain. I just kept climbing, looking for shelter, and found this cave." "You were lucky," Jonas said bluntly. "There are worse things than storms in these mountains. Mountain lions, bears waking up from winter, loose rocks that can send you tumbling down a cliff face. A woman alone out here." He shook his head. "It is not safe." Sarah lifted her chin, a flash of defiance in her eyes despite her vulnerable position. "I have been coming up here for 2 years and never had trouble before. I am always careful. Except today." She flushed. "Except today," she admitted, "but I could not just leave them." Something about her stubborn compassion made Jonas's stern expression soften. He reached into his pack again and pulled out some dried meat and hard biscuits. "Here, you need to eat. Build your strength back up." Sarah accepted the food gratefully, breaking off small pieces and chewing slowly. Jonas pulled out his own rations and ate in silence, watching the storm through the cave entrance. The wind howled like a living thing, and lightning occasionally split the darkening sky. It was going to be a rough night. "Thank you for sharing your shelter," Sarah said after a while. "And your supplies. I know mountain men generally prefer solitude." Jonas glanced at her. "Most times, yes. But I am not going to let someone freeze or starve just to keep my peace and quiet." They fell into a comfortable silence, the only sounds the crackling fire and the storm outside. The kittens had fallen asleep in Sarah's lap, tiny balls of fur seeking what warmth they could find. Sarah gently stroked them, her expression tender. "You have family in Salt Lake City?" Jonas asked eventually, more to keep her talking than out of real curiosity. He had learned that people in distress did better when kept engaged. "Just my aunt," Sarah said. "My parents died when I was 16. Fever took them both within a week of each other. My Aunt Agnes took me in. She never married, runs an apothecary shop on Main Street. She taught me about herbs and medicine. It is how we make our living." "That is useful knowledge," Jonas said. "Not many people know the old ways anymore." "You need medicine often, living out here alone?" "Sometimes. Cuts, sprains, the occasional fever." "I know some basic remedies, but nothing fancy." Jonas poked at the fire with a stick, sending sparks drifting upward. "I was a soldier before this. Learned to take care of wounds in the field. When the war ended, I could not settle back into town life. Too many people, too much noise. The mountains suited me better." Sarah watched him with curious eyes. "Do you ever get lonely? The question was more personal than Jonas expected, but something about the intimate setting and the storm outside made it feel natural. "Sometimes," he admitted. "But I prefer the loneliness up here to the loneliness I felt surrounded by people who did not understand." She nodded slowly, as if she understood that feeling herself. "My aunt is kind, but she does not really understand me either. She thinks I should be focused on finding a husband, settling down. She does not understand why I like coming up into the hills, being alone with nature. She says it is unladylike." "Is that what you want? A husband and settling down?" Sarah was quiet for a long moment. "I do not know. Sometimes I think it would be nice to have someone who truly knew me, who I could share my life with. But all the men in town who have shown interest only see what they want to see. They want a quiet, obedient wife who will keep their house and raise their children and never have a thought of her own." Jonas found himself nodding. "That sounds stifling." "It is." She looked up at him, and in the firelight her eyes seemed to hold depths he had not noticed before. "What about you? Did you ever want to marry?" "Once," Jonas said, the word coming out rougher than he intended. "Before the war, she did not wait for me. Married a banker while I was gone. I cannot blame her. War makes everything uncertain." "I am sorry." Jonas shrugged his broad shoulders. "It was a long time ago. Different life." The storm intensified, rain now mixed with hail that clattered against the rocks outside. Sarah pulled the blanket tighter, and Jonas noticed she was still shivering slightly. The fire was warm, but the cave was drafty, and she had been soaked through. "Come here," he said, gesturing to his side of the fire. "Bring the kittens. We need to share body heat. You are still too cold." Sarah hesitated, her cheeks flushing pink. That would not be proper." "Proper does not matter if you freeze," Jonas said practically. "I give you my word as a gentleman that I will not take advantage. But you need warmth, and I can provide it. I have been through worse winters than this, and I know the signs of someone losing the fight against cold." Sarah looked down at the kittens in her lap, then back at Jonas. Slowly she stood, keeping the blanket wrapped around herself, and moved to sit beside him. Jonas immediately felt how cold she still was, even through the blanket. He removed his heavy coat and draped it over both of them, creating a cocoon of warmth. Sarah settled against his side tentatively, and Jonas tried to ignore how small she felt next to his large frame, how her presence stirred something in him that had been dormant for a long time. He focused instead on keeping the fire going, on listening to the storm, on anything but the soft weight of her leaning against him. "Thank you," she whispered. "I can feel your warmth already." Jonas nodded, not trusting his voice. One of the kittens mewed softly, and Sarah adjusted them in her lap, making sure they were all tucked into the warmth. As the night deepened and the storm raged on, an unexpected peace settled over the cave. Sarah's breathing gradually evened out as she warmed up, and eventually, exhausted from her ordeal, she fell asleep against Jonas's shoulder. He sat very still, not wanting to wake her, his arm positioned to keep her from falling. Jonas stared into the fire, his mind working through unfamiliar feelings. He had been alone for so long, had convinced himself he preferred it that way. But something about this woman touched something in him. Her courage in rescuing the kittens, her stubbornness in the face of danger, her quiet strength. The way she had looked at him without the fear or pity he sometimes saw in town when he went in for supplies. She had looked at him like he was just a man, nothing more, nothing less. The kittens slept in a pile on her lap, their tiny bodies rising and falling with each breath. Jonas found himself hoping they would make it through the night, for Sarah's sake and maybe a little for his own. Sometime past midnight, the storm finally began to ease. The wind died down to a murmur, and the rain became a gentle patter. Jonas carefully added more wood to the fire, moving slowly so as not to disturb Sarah. She stirred slightly but did not wake, her head nestled against his shoulder, her dark hair spread across his chest. Jonas allowed himself to close his eyes, just for a moment, and when he did, he felt something shift in his chest. Something that felt dangerous and precious at the same time. When dawn broke, pale light filtered into the cave, and Jonas woke to find Sarah still asleep against him. The kittens were stirring, making soft sounds of hunger. Jonas knew they needed food soon, or they would not survive. He had an idea, but it would require getting back to his cabin, which was about 2 miles north along the ridge. Sarah woke slowly, blinking in confusion before she realized where she was. She pulled away quickly, her cheeks flushing red. "I am sorry, I did not mean to fall asleep on you." "You needed rest," Jonas said, standing and stretching his stiff muscles. "How do you feel?" "Better. Warmer." She looked down at the kittens. "But these little ones need milk." "I have some powdered milk at my cabin," Jonas said. "It is not too far from here. We can go there first, feed the kittens, and then I will take you back to Salt Lake City." Sarah looked surprised. "You have a cabin?" "I thought you lived rough in the mountains." "I do, mostly. But I have a small place for winter when the weather gets too dangerous even for me. It is basic, but it has supplies." Sarah stood, the blanket still wrapped around her, and checked her dress. It was mostly dry now, if a bit stiff. "Could you turn around again?" Jonas did, and a few moments later Sarah told him he could look. She had dressed and was attempting to tidy her hair, though without a brush. There was only so much she could do. She looked tired but determined, the kittens cradled carefully in her arms. They set out into the morning, the world washed clean by the storm. The air smelled of pine and wet earth, and the sky was clearing to a brilliant blue. Jonas led the way along paths only he knew, his long strides eating up the distance while Sarah struggled to keep pace behind him. He noticed and slowed down, remembering she was not accustomed to this terrain. "Sorry," he said. "I forget sometimes that not everyone moves like they have mountain goat blood." Sarah laughed, a little breathless. "It is fine. I am just glad to be moving. Sitting still in that cave all night made me stiff." The cabin appeared after about 40 minutes of hiking, a small but solid structure built against a rock face, with a good overhang to protect it from the worst weather. It was simple. One room with a stone fireplace, a rough-hewn bed, a table with 2 chairs, and shelves lined with supplies. But it was clean and well-maintained, and Sarah looked relieved to see it. Jonas quickly got a fire going in the fireplace while Sarah set the kittens gently on the bed. He found his powdered milk and mixed it with warm water, then showed Sarah how to feed the kittens using strips of cloth soaked in the mixture. It was slow work, but the kittens latched on eagerly, their tiny mouths working hard. "They are so hungry," Sarah said, her voice full of emotion as she fed the smallest one. "Poor babies." "They are fighters," Jonas observed, feeding one of the others. "Not many would have survived the night without milk, and in that cold, they have spirit." As they worked together, Jonas found himself watching Sarah more than the kittens. The way the morning light caught in her hair, the gentle patience in her movements, the soft words of encouragement she murmured to the tiny creatures. Something was taking root in his chest, something he had not felt in years. When the kittens had finally drunk their fill and fallen into milk-drunk sleep, Sarah looked up at Jonas with a radiant smile. "Thank you. I know this must seem silly, fussing over a few stray cats, but it matters to me." "It is not silly," Jonas said, his voice rough. "Compassion is never silly." Their eyes met, and for a moment the air between them felt charged with something unspoken. Sarah's smile faded into something more serious, more searching, and Jonas found he could not look away. The moment was broken by a knock at the door. Jonas tensed immediately, his hand going to the knife at his belt. He was not expecting anyone, and few people knew about this cabin. He motioned for Sarah to stay back, then moved to the door. "Who is it?" he called out. "Tom Winters, Jonas. From the trading post. Got something urgent to discuss." Jonas relaxed slightly. Tom was a decent man, one of the few people from civilization he maintained contact with. He opened the door to find a grizzled man in his 50s with a weathered face and kind eyes. Tom stepped inside, then stopped short when he saw Sarah. "Oh, I did not know you had company. Miss Hayes got caught in the storm yesterday," Jonas explained. "I am about to escort her back to Salt Lake City." Tom's expression grew serious. "That might be harder than you think. There has been trouble in the valley. A gang has been causing problems, robbing travelers on the roads, even hitting some of the outlying farms. Sheriff sent word to warn anyone coming down from the mountains." Sarah went pale. "My aunt. I need to get back to her. She will be worried sick." "The gang is mostly hitting people on the roads," Tom said quickly. "Town itself should be safe enough, but traveling alone would be dangerous right now." Jonas's jaw tightened. "I will take her. I know ways that avoid the main roads." Tom nodded. "Figured you would. Just wanted to give you warning. Also brought your supply order from last month." He gestured outside, where Jonas could see a pack mule loaded with goods. "Appreciate it, Tom." The older man glanced between Jonas and Sarah, a knowing look in his eyes, but he said nothing more. "I will be heading back now. You two be careful." After Tom left, Sarah turned to Jonas with worry clear on her face. "I cannot ask you to risk yourself for me if there is a dangerous gang." "You are not asking," Jonas said firmly. "I am offering. I have dealt with worse than a gang of thieves, and I know this country better than they ever will. We will take the high trails, stay out of sight. You will be home safe before sunset." Sarah studied his face, and whatever she saw there seemed to reassure her. "Thank you, Jonas. I do not know how I will ever repay your kindness." Jonas shook his head. "No repayment needed. Now we need to figure out what to do with these kittens. They cannot make the journey yet. They are too young, too weak." Sarah's face fell. "I cannot just leave them here." "I am not suggesting you do," Jonas said. "I am suggesting I keep them here, care for them until they are strong enough to travel. Then I can bring them down to you in town. You would do that?" Jonas found himself nodding, even though the practical part of his brain told him it was a complication he did not need. "I would. They need care every few hours right now. In a few weeks, they will be stronger, able to eat solid food. Then they can make the trip." Sarah's eyes shimmered with tears. "You are a good man, Jonas Northwood." Jonas felt heat creep up his neck at her words. He was not used to such open appreciation. "I am just practical. Now let's pack some supplies for you and get moving. The sooner we leave, the sooner you are home safe." They prepared quickly, Jonas filling a pack with food and water for the journey. He made sure Sarah had proper boots, finding a pair he had that were too small for him but fit her reasonably well. He also gave her a warmer coat, knowing the high trails could be cold even in spring. Before they left, Sarah knelt by the bed where the kittens slept in a nest of blankets. She gently stroked each one, whispering promises that she would see them again soon. Jonas watched from the doorway, something twisting in his chest. Then they set out, Jonas leading the way along trails that climbed higher into the mountains before eventually descending toward the valley from the north. It was a longer route, but safer, avoiding the main roads where the gang had been operating. As they walked, they talked. Sarah told him about her life in Salt Lake City, about helping her aunt with the apothecary, about the herbs she gathered, and the remedies they made. She spoke of her dreams of maybe one day having her own shop, of being independent and free to live life on her own terms. Jonas found himself sharing more than he usually did, telling her about his years in the mountains, the wildlife he encountered, the changing seasons, and how each one brought its own challenges and beauty. He told her about learning to read the weather to track animals to survive in conditions that would kill most men. "It sounds like a hard life," Sarah said as they paused to rest and drink from a mountain stream. "It is," Jonas admitted, "but it is honest. Out here, you know where you stand. The mountain does not lie to you, does not pretend to be something it is not. It just is, and you either learn to live with it or you do not survive." "I think I understand that," Sarah said softly. "I feel most myself when I am out in nature, away from the expectations and judgments of town. Out here, I can just be Sarah, not Miss Hayes who needs to find a husband, not the poor orphan girl people pity." Jonas looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the truth in her words. She belonged out here in the wild places, he realized. She had the same hunger for freedom that he did, the same need to live life on her own terms. They continued on, and as the sun climbed higher, Jonas found himself increasingly aware of Sarah's presence beside him. The way she moved with increasing confidence over the rough terrain, the way she pointed out different plants and explained their medicinal uses, the sound of her laughter when she slipped on a loose rock, and he caught her arm to steady her. By afternoon, they had circled around to approach Salt Lake City from the northeast, coming down out of the foothills into cultivated farmland. The city sprawled before them, much larger now than when Jonas had last been this close, probably 2 years ago. Sarah's pace quickened as they got closer to town. "My aunt's shop is on Main Street, near the corner of 2nd South. She lives above it, and so do I." Jonas nodded, following her lead as they entered the city streets. People stared at them as they passed, at the mountain man in his rough clothes and long hair, at the muddy, disheveled woman beside him. Jonas ignored them, focused on getting Sarah home safely. The apothecary was a tidy shop with a green painted door and a sign that read, "Hayes Herbal Remedies." Before Sarah could even reach for the handle, the door flew open, and a thin woman with graying hair pulled Sarah into a fierce embrace. "Sarah. Oh, thank God. I have been beside myself with worry. When you did not come home last night, and then Tom Winters said there was a gang causing trouble." The woman, who Jonas assumed was Aunt Agnes, pulled back to look Sarah over. "You are all right. You are not hurt." "I am fine, Aunt Agnes. I got caught in the storm up in the mountains, but Mr. Northwood found me and gave me shelter. He kept me safe and brought me home." Agnes turned to look at Jonas properly for the first time, her sharp eyes assessing him. Jonas stood still under her scrutiny, used to being judged by townspeople. "Mr. Northwood," Agnes said finally, "I owe you a debt I can never repay. Please come inside. Let me fix you a proper meal, give you some supplies for your journey back." Jonas started to refuse, instinct making him want to flee back to the mountains, but Sarah touched his arm. "Please," she said quietly, "let us thank you properly." Something in her eyes made Jonas nod. "All right. But I cannot stay long." Inside, the shop smelled of dried herbs and honey. The walls were lined with jars and bottles, bundles of plants hanging from the ceiling. It was cozy and warm, and Jonas felt out of place in his rough mountain gear. Agnes quickly ushered them upstairs to the living quarters, a comfortable space with a kitchen, sitting room, and 2 bedrooms. She insisted Jonas sit, while she and Sarah heated water for tea and prepared food. Jonas sat stiffly in a chair that felt too small for his large frame, watching as the 2 women moved around the kitchen with practiced ease. Sarah changed into fresh clothes and brushed out her hair, transforming from the bedraggled woman he had found in the cave into someone who looked like she belonged in polite society. But Jonas found he preferred the version of her that had sat with him by the fire, wrapped in a blanket, caring for tiny kittens over the meal. Sarah recounted the whole story to her aunt, including the part about the kittens. Agnes listened with a mixture of exasperation and affection. "Only you would risk your life for stray cats," Agnes said, but her tone was fond. "Though I am grateful Mr. Northwood was there to help, I shudder to think what might have happened otherwise. Jonas has offered to care for the kittens until they are strong enough to travel, then bring them down to us," Sarah said, glancing at Jonas. Agnes's eyebrows rose. "That is extraordinarily kind, Mr. Northwood. Are you sure it is not too much trouble?" "It is no trouble," Jonas said, which was not entirely true, but he found he did not mind. "They need care, and I can provide it." As the afternoon wore on, Jonas found himself reluctant to leave. He told himself it was because the meal was good, the first proper cooked food he had eaten in months. But truthfully, it was Sarah's presence that kept him rooted to the chair. The way she smiled at him, the way she included him in the conversation, the way she made him feel like he mattered. Finally, as the sun began to sink toward the western mountains, Jonas stood. "I should head back. Want to make some distance before dark." Sarah stood too, disappointment clear on her face. "Of course. Thank you again, Jonas, for everything." Agnes pressed a package into his hands. "Some supplies for your journey and some remedies that might be useful in the mountains, for cuts and such. Sarah tells me you live alone up there, and a man should have proper medicine." Jonas accepted the package with a nod of thanks. Sarah walked him to the door and they stood on the threshold, suddenly awkward. "You will bring the kittens when they are ready?" Sarah asked. "I will. Probably 3, maybe 4 weeks. I will check with Tom at the trading post, make sure the roads are safe before I come." "I will look forward to it," Sarah said softly. "And Jonas, if you ever need anything, if you are ever in town, please come by. You are always welcome here." Jonas met her eyes and saw the sincerity there. "Thank you, Sarah. That means more than you know." He wanted to say more, wanted to tell her that finding her in that cave had changed something in him, that the thought of going back to his solitary life in the mountains suddenly felt less appealing than it had 2 days ago. But the words stuck in his throat, and instead, he simply nodded and turned to leave. As Jonas made his way back out of the city and up into the foothills, his pack heavy with supplies, he could not stop thinking about Sarah. About her laugh, her kindness, the way she had felt sleeping against his shoulder. About the life she led in town and the person she became out in the wild. When he reached his cabin that night, it felt emptier than it ever had before. The kittens mewed for their feeding, and Jonas carefully prepared the milk mixture, feeding each one with the same patience Sarah had shown. As he did, he found himself talking to them. "Your Sarah will be back for you soon enough," he murmured to the smallest one, the little female with the white paws. "And maybe, just maybe, I will have the courage to tell her that I would like to see her again, more than just once, to deliver you 3 troublemakers." The kitten purred against his calloused hand, and Jonas felt something warm settle in his chest. Hope, he realized. For the first time in years, he felt hope. The next 3 weeks passed in a strange blur for Jonas. His usual routine of checking trap lines, hunting, and maintaining his camp felt different somehow. Empty. He found himself thinking about Sarah constantly, wondering what she was doing, if she was thinking about him too. The kittens thrived under his care, growing stronger each day. Their eyes opened fully, bright and curious, and they began to explore the cabin on wobbly legs. Jonas found himself growing attached to them despite himself, particularly the little female with white paws, who seemed determined to climb his leg whenever he sat down. He made trips to the trading post twice during those weeks, ostensibly to trade pelts and pick up supplies, but really to ask Tom if there was any news from town. The gang had been caught, Tom told him during the second visit, rounded up by the sheriff and some deputized townsmen. The roads were safe again. Jonas returned to his cabin with his heart beating faster than usual. There was no reason to wait any longer. The kittens were eating solid food now, drinking water from a bowl. They were ready to travel, which meant he was out of excuses to avoid going back to Salt Lake City. The truth was, Jonas was terrified. He had survived blizzards, faced down bears, lived through a war. But the thought of seeing Sarah again, of possibly laying his feelings bare, scared him more than any of that. What if she did not feel the same way? What if those hours in the cave had meant nothing to her beyond gratitude for being rescued? What if he was a fool for hoping? But the alternative, never seeing her again, never knowing, felt worse than any possible rejection. So on a bright morning in early May, Jonas carefully packed the 3 kittens into a specially prepared basket with air holes and soft blankets. He slung it over his shoulder, secured his pack, and set out for Salt Lake City. The journey took most of the day, and the kittens complained loudly for the first few hours before finally settling down to sleep. Jonas took the direct route this time, down through the canyon and along the main road. Several wagons passed him, families and travelers who gave him curious looks but friendly waves. By late afternoon, Jonas found himself once again walking down Main Street in Salt Lake City. The basket of kittens drew attention, children pointing and asking their parents what the big mountain man was carrying. Jonas ignored them, his eyes fixed on the green door of the apothecary ahead. His heart pounded as he pushed open the door, a bell jingling overhead. The shop was busy, several customers browsing the shelves while Agnes helped an elderly man at the counter. Agnes looked up at the sound of the bell, and her face broke into a genuine smile. "Mr. Northwood, Sarah said you would come. She is upstairs. Go right on up, please." Jonas nodded his thanks and climbed the stairs, the basket in his arms. He knocked on the door to the living quarters and heard Sarah's voice call out, "Come in." He opened the door to find Sarah standing by the window, light streaming around her. She wore a simple blue dress, her dark hair pinned up, and when she turned and saw him, her face lit up with such joy that Jonas felt his breath catch. "Jonas, you came, and you brought them." Sarah rushed forward, her attention immediately going to the basket. "Oh, let me see them. Are they well?" Jonas set the basket down and opened it. 3 healthy kittens immediately climbed out, meowing loudly and looking around their new surroundings with interest. Sarah laughed and scooped up the little female with white paws, holding her close. "They are so much bigger, and so beautiful." "Oh, Jonas, you took such good care of them." "They are fighters," Jonas said, watching Sarah cuddle the kitten. "Made it easy." Sarah set the kitten down and suddenly threw her arms around Jonas, hugging him tightly. "Thank you for everything, for saving me, for caring for them, for coming back." Jonas stood rigid for a moment, shocked by the embrace, then slowly brought his arms up to wrap around her. She felt perfect there, her head barely reaching his shoulder, her warmth seeping into him. He allowed himself to hold her for just a moment longer than appropriate before reluctantly stepping back. "I told you I would bring them," he said, his voice rough. "I know, but—" Sarah looked up at him, and he saw something vulnerable in her eyes. "I was afraid you might change your mind. That I might never see you again." Jonas's heart stuttered. "You wanted to see me again?" Sarah's cheeks flushed pink. "Of course I did. Jonas, these past weeks, I could not stop thinking about you, about our time in the cave and the walk down the mountain. About how easy it was to talk to you, how you did not judge me for being different. I kept hoping you felt it too, but I was not sure, and—" Jonas stepped forward, cutting off her nervous rambling by gently taking her hand. His large, calloused hand completely engulfed her small, soft one. "Sarah," he said quietly, "I felt it too. I have thought of nothing but you since I left. Being in the mountains alone, which used to be my peace, felt empty without you." Sarah's eyes widened, hope blooming on her face. "Truly, truly." Jonas took a deep breath, gathering his courage. "I am not good with words, and I am not much to look at with my rough ways. But I am a good man, Sarah. I can provide, I can protect, and I can promise that if you gave me a chance, I would spend every day trying to make you happy." Tears sparkled in Sarah's eyes. "You are plenty to look at," she said, a tremulous smile on her lips. "And I do not need pretty words. I just need honesty, which you have always given me. Jonas, I have been courted by men in town, proper gentlemen with businesses and good names, but none of them made me feel the way you do. None of them saw me the way you do." "How do I see you?" Jonas asked, his thumb rubbing gentle circles on the back of her hand. "Like I am strong," Sarah whispered. "Like I am capable and brave and valuable, not just something pretty to be kept in a house. Like I am an equal." Jonas lifted his free hand to cup her cheek, his touch gentle despite the roughness of his palm. "You are all those things and more. You are the bravest person I know, risking yourself for helpless creatures, staying strong in a storm. You are smart and kind and so beautiful it hurts to look at you sometimes." Sarah leaned into his touch, her eyes falling closed. "What do we do now?" she whispered. "You live in the mountains and I live here. How can this possibly work?" Jonas had been thinking about this for weeks, working through the logistics in his mind during long nights by the fire. "I could come down from the mountains," he said slowly. "Not to live in town. I do not think I could do that. But there is land between here and the high country, good land. I could build a real house, not just a cabin. Farm a little, still trap and hunt some. Be close enough to town that you could keep working with your aunt, but far enough that we would have space, have freedom." Sarah opened her eyes, staring at him with wonder. "You would do that? Change your whole life?" "My life up there is not much of a life anymore," Jonas admitted. "Not without you in it. These past weeks showed me that. I do not want to be alone anymore, Sarah. I want to build something with you, if you will have me." Sarah's answer was to rise up on her toes and press her lips to his. It was soft and sweet and perfect, and Jonas felt something in his chest crack open, letting in light after years of darkness. He pulled her closer, deepening the kiss, pouring all his feelings into it. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Sarah was crying and smiling at the same time. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will have you. I will build a life with you. Jonas, I think I have been waiting for you without even knowing it." Jonas rested his forehead against hers, his heart so full he thought it might burst. Around their feet, the three kittens played, chasing each other across the floor, oblivious to the life-changing moment happening above them. A knock on the door made them spring apart, both looking guilty. Agnes poked her head in, took one look at their faces, and smiled knowingly. "I thought I might find a different situation than just kitten delivery when I sent you up here, Mr. Northwood." Sarah laughed, wiping at her tears. "Aunt Agnes, Jonas, and I, we want to be together. He has asked me to marry him." Agnes raised an eyebrow. "Has he now? Did I miss a formal proposal?" Jonas cleared his throat, suddenly feeling very much on the spot. Well, not in so many words, but—" "It is all right," Agnes said, coming into the room. "I could see which way the wind was blowing when you two looked at each other last time, and I have seen Sarah this past month, moping around like a lovesick girl. I figured you felt the same when you came back." She looked at Jonas seriously. "You are a good man, Mr. Northwood. I saw that immediately, and you make Sarah happy, which is all I have ever wanted for her. You have my blessing, if that matters." "It matters a great deal," Jonas said sincerely. "Sarah is precious to me. I will take care of her, I swear it." "I believe you will," Agnes said. "Now, you two have plans to make. I assume you will not want a long engagement." Sarah looked at Jonas, a question in her eyes. He shook his head. "As soon as it can be arranged," he said. "I have waited long enough for happiness. I do not want to wait any longer." The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Jonas stayed in Salt Lake City, taking a room at a boarding house but spending most of his time with Sarah. They walked around the city together, Jonas uncomfortable with the crowds but willing to bear it for her sake. Sarah showed him her favorite places, the parks where she liked to sit and read, the streets where the best shops were. But they both knew their true joy lay outside the city. Jonas took Sarah out to look at land, parcels that were for sale in the foothills. They finally found a perfect spot about 8 miles from town, close enough to be accessible but far enough to feel remote. It had a creek running through it, good soil, and a stunning view of the mountains. There was a small cabin already on the property, barely more than a shack, but Jonas could see the potential. "We can fix this up temporarily while I build a proper house," he said, walking through the space with Sarah. "It will take time, but I am a good builder. I will make you a home you can be proud of." "I would be proud of a tent if you were in it with me," Sarah said, slipping her hand into his. "But yes, a house would be nice, with a big kitchen so I can make remedies and windows facing the mountains and a porch where we can sit in the evenings." "And a barn for animals," Jonas added. "A few cows, some chickens, maybe a horse or two. And the kittens, of course," Sarah laughed. The 3 cats had settled into life in the apartment above the apothecary. But Agnes had made it clear they were Sarah's responsibility and would be going with her when she married. They were married on a sunny morning in June 1878, in a simple ceremony at the small church Sarah's family had attended. Agnes was there, of course, and Tom Winters came down from the mountains. A few of Sarah's friends from town attended, curious to meet the mysterious mountain man she had fallen in love with. Jonas wore new clothes for the occasion, his hair trimmed and his beard shaped, though he refused to shave it completely. He still looked wild and dangerous standing at the altar, his broad shoulders straining against the fabric of his coat. But when Sarah walked down the aisle in a simple white dress, his face transformed with such love and tenderness that several women in the congregation sighed. They spoke their vows in clear, firm voices, promising to love and honor each other for all their days. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Jonas kissed Sarah with a passion that made the preacher cough awkwardly, but neither of them cared. The celebration afterward was small, just a meal at a local restaurant with their few guests. But Jonas and Sarah barely ate, too focused on each other, too eager to begin their new life together. As the sun set, they rode out to their new property in a wagon loaded with Sarah's belongings. Jonas had spent the past weeks fixing up the cabin, making it livable if not luxurious. He had repaired the roof, patched the walls, built a proper bed frame, and installed a good stove. It was simple but clean, and he had even picked wildflowers to put in a jar on the table. Sarah looked around the cabin with tears in her eyes. "It is perfect," she whispered. "Our home." Jonas pulled her into his arms, kissing her thoroughly. "Our home," he agreed, "the first of many we will build together." That night, as they lay tangled together in the narrow bed, the 3 kittens curled up at their feet, Sarah traced patterns on Jonas's bare chest. "I never imagined I could be this happy," she murmured. "A month and a half ago, I thought I was going to freeze to death in that cave. Now I am here with you, married, starting a whole new life. It feels like a dream." Jonas caught her hand and brought it to his lips, kissing her fingers. "If it is a dream, I do not ever want to wake up. You are the best thing that has ever happened to me, Sarah." I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret choosing me." "I could never regret it," Sarah said fiercely. "You are everything I did not know I needed, everything I was looking for without realizing it." The summer passed in a blur of hard work and deep happiness. Jonas began building their proper house, laying the foundation and framing the walls while Sarah worked on making the cabin more comfortable and helped her aunt in town a few days a week. They fell into a rhythm, working together during the day and falling into each other's arms at night, learning each other's bodies and hearts with equal passion. The land began to transform under their care. Jonas cleared space for a garden, and Sarah planted vegetables and herbs, her knowledge of plants making the garden thrive. They acquired chickens, and Jonas built a sturdy coop to protect them from predators. In late summer, they bought a milk cow from a neighboring farmer, and Sarah learned to milk her each morning. The 3 cats, now nearly full-grown, earned their keep by keeping the mice away from the chicken feed. The smallest one, the female with white paws that Sarah had named Daisy, remained Sarah's shadow, following her everywhere she went. As autumn approached, the frame of the new house stood complete, and Jonas began work on the roof and walls. Neighbors they had not even known they had began stopping by, curious about the mountain man and his wife. Most were friendly, offering help and advice. A few of the men even pitched in on building days, and the house came together faster than Jonas had expected. Sarah made friends with the neighboring women, trading remedies and recipes, slowly building a community. It was different from her life in town, more isolated but somehow richer. She loved waking up to the sound of birdsong instead of wagon wheels, loved seeing the mountains from her window, loved the feeling of building something real and lasting with Jonas. In late October, Sarah realized her monthly courses had not come. She waited another few weeks to be sure, then told Jonas one evening as they sat on the porch of the still unfinished house, wrapped in blankets against the autumn chill. "I think I am carrying our child," she said quietly, her hand on her stomach. Jonas went very still beside her. Then he turned to look at her, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "Truly?" Sarah nodded, her own eyes filling. "I am almost certain. Aunt Agnes confirmed it when I went to see her yesterday. She said probably due in late spring." Jonas pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "A baby," he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. "Our baby. Sarah, I never dared to hope for so much. We are going to be parents," Sarah said, laughing through her tears. "You are going to be a father." "I am going to be a father," Jonas repeated as if testing out the words. Then he was kissing her, his face wet with tears, and Sarah held him, feeling the tremors running through his large frame. This man who had faced down bears and survived war was undone by the news of a coming baby, and Sarah loved him all the more for it. Jonas became even more protective after that, if such a thing were possible. He insisted Sarah not lift anything heavy, not overwork herself, not take any risks. Sarah found it endearing if occasionally frustrating, but she understood his fear. This precious new life growing inside her was a miracle to both of them. Winter came, and Jonas finished the house just as the first heavy snows began to fall. They moved in on a cold December day, lighting the first fire in the big stone fireplace Jonas had built. The house was beautiful, with large windows that let in the light, a spacious kitchen where Sarah could work on her remedies, and a bedroom upstairs that overlooked the mountains. Jonas had even built a smaller room next to theirs for the baby. They spent that first winter in their new home learning how to live together in the isolated months when travel was difficult. Jonas taught Sarah to snowshoe so she could move around the property even in deep snow. Sarah taught Jonas to read. something he had never learned well, sitting with him by the fire in the evenings with a book of poetry Agnes had given them as a wedding gift. The cats grew fat and lazy by the fire, and the animals were warm in the barn Jonas had completed just before the worst of the weather hit. It was a time of quiet contentment, the world outside reduced to white silence while inside their home, life and love flourished. As Sarah's belly grew round with their child, Jonas would spend hours with his hand on it, feeling the baby kick and move. "Strong," he would say with pride, "like the mother." Spring arrived slowly, the snow reluctant to release its grip on the land. But eventually, the world began to thaw, and new life appeared everywhere. Sarah's garden began to show green shoots, the animals grew more active, and Sarah herself bloomed with impending motherhood. On a warm evening in May, nearly a year to the day after their wedding, Sarah's labor began. Jonas rode hard for town, fetching Agnes and the midwife, his heart in his throat the whole way. By the time they returned, Sarah was well into labor, and Jonas felt helpless in a way he had never experienced. He could fight any physical threat, but he could do nothing to ease her pain. Agnes and the midwife shooed him out of the bedroom, telling him to boil water and stay out of the way. Jonas paced the main room, praying to a God he was not sure he believed in, begging for Sarah and the baby to be all right. Hours passed, and the sun was setting when he finally heard the thin, reedy cry of a newborn. Jonas froze, his heart stopping. Then Agnes appeared in the doorway, her face tired but smiling. "You have a son," she said. "A big, healthy boy, and Sarah is fine, just exhausted." Jonas pushed past her, climbing the stairs 2 at a time. Sarah lay in their bed, her hair damp with sweat, her face pale but radiant. In her arms, wrapped in a blanket, was the smallest human Jonas had ever seen. The baby had a shock of dark hair and was waving tiny fists in the air, his face red from crying. Jonas approached slowly, afraid to break the spell. Sarah looked up at him and smiled, exhausted but happy. "Come meet your son," she said softly. Jonas sat carefully on the edge of the bed, and Sarah placed the baby in his arms. Jonas looked down at the tiny face, at the small fingers that immediately wrapped around his large thumb, and felt his world shift on its axis. This was his son, his and Sarah's, the product of their love. "He is perfect," Jonas said, his voice rough with emotion. "What should we call him?" They had discussed names during the pregnancy but had not decided on anything definite. Now, looking at his son, Jonas said, "James, after my father, James Northwood." Sarah smiled. "James, I like that." James Northwood, welcome to the world. Little James Northwood proved to be a strong, healthy baby with a good set of lungs. He kept them up at night those first weeks, and Jonas and Sarah took turns walking him, bouncing him, trying everything to soothe him, but neither of them minded. This was the life they had built together, and every sleepless night was precious. As James grew, he became the center of their world. Jonas would come in from working the fields or trap lines and immediately reach for his son, bouncing him on his knee while Sarah prepared dinner. They marveled at every milestone, every smile, every new sound James made. The seasons passed, each one bringing new challenges and joys. Their farm grew more prosperous as Jonas cleared more land and Sarah's garden expanded. She began selling her remedies to people in the area, building a small but steady business. Jonas took to farming better than he expected, though he still spent time in the mountains, trapping and hunting, needing that connection to the wild. When James was 2, Sarah became pregnant again. This time, she gave birth to a daughter in the winter, a tiny, delicate thing they named Julia. If Jonas had been protective before, he became doubly so with a daughter. But Julia proved to have her mother's spirit, growing into a bold, curious child who feared nothing. The years rolled by, each one adding to their story. Jonas built additions to the house as their family grew, adding a third child, another boy named Jacob, when Julia was 3. Their home was filled with the chaos and joy of children, with the animals that seemed to constantly multiply. Daisy had produced several litters of kittens, which they gave away to neighboring families, with the rich smell of Sarah's cooking and the sound of Jonas's laughter. Jonas never lost his edge, his mountain man skills, but they were tempered now by love and responsibility. He taught his sons to track and hunt, to read the weather and respect the wilderness. He taught Julia the same things, much to Sarah's amusement, and Julia proved to be the best tracker of all 3 children. Sarah continued her work with herbs and remedies, teaching the children about plants and healing. The community came to depend on her, seeking her out for everything from salves for cuts to remedies for coughs. She and Jonas became respected members of the community, their love story a favorite tale told around fires. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Jonas took Sarah back up to the cave where he had first found her. It was a warm summer day, and they left the children with Agnes for the afternoon. They climbed the familiar paths, holding hands, occasionally stopping to kiss like young lovers. When they reached the cave, Sarah looked around with tears in her eyes. "I cannot believe it has been 10 years. It feels like yesterday and a lifetime ago all at once." Jonas pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her from behind as they looked out at the view. "Best storm I ever weathered," he said. "Finding you there with those kittens, thinking you were the bravest, most foolish woman I had ever met." Sarah laughed. "And now I know you are still brave and sometimes foolish, but you are also strong and wise and the best partner a man could ask for. You made me believe in happiness again, Sarah. You gave me a family, a home, a reason to wake up every morning grateful to be alive." Sarah turned in his arms to face him, her hands coming up to cup his bearded face. "You gave me freedom," she said. "The freedom to be myself, to live the life I wanted, to be strong and wild and still be loved. You saw me, Jonas, really saw me when no one else did. That is the greatest gift anyone has ever given me." They kissed there in the mouth of the cave, the wind whispering around them, the mountains standing eternal and unchanging. 2 people who had found each other in the midst of a storm and built something beautiful together. 20 years after that first meeting, Jonas and Sarah sat on the porch of their home, now much expanded and improved. James was married now, living on his own piece of land nearby with his wife. Julia, strong and independent at 18, was preparing to open her own apothecary in Salt Lake City with her grandmother's help. Jacob, the youngest, was 16 and already taller than his father, with the same love of the mountains. Sarah's hair was starting to gray at the temples, and Jonas's beard was more silver than brown now, but they still looked at each other with the same love and passion as they had that first night in the cave. "You ever regret it?" Jonas asked, his arm around Sarah's shoulders. "Giving up town life for this," Sarah laughed. "Not for a single moment. This is where I belong, Jonas, here with you, with our family, with our life. This is everything I ever wanted, even when I did not know I wanted it." Jonas kissed the top of her head. "I think about that storm sometimes. If it had not come when it did, if you had not gone up the mountain that day, if you had not found those kittens, our whole lives would be different. But we did," Sarah said, snuggling closer to him. "We found each other exactly when we were supposed to, and we built this beautiful life together." As if summoned by the memory, an old cat hobbled onto the porch. Daisy, now ancient by cat standards, came to sit by Sarah's feet. Sarah reached down to scratch her ears gently. "Thank you, old friend," she whispered. "Thank you for bringing him to me." The sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. In the distance, they could hear Jacob working in the barn, singing tunelessly. The sound of their grandchildren playing drifted from James's house across the field. The garden was in full bloom, and the crops were growing tall and strong. It was a good life, a rich life, built on the foundation of that single stormy night when a mountain man had found a woman sheltering lost kittens. He had sheltered her too, just as the title of their story promised, and in doing so had found his own shelter in her love. Jonas tightened his arm around Sarah, and she leaned her head on his broad shoulder. They sat there as the stars began to appear, two souls who had found each other against all odds, who had built something lasting and true. "Forever," Jonas murmured, the word both a promise and a statement of fact. "Forever," Sarah echoed, her hand finding his and lacing their fingers together. And as the night deepened around them, their home glowing warm with lamplight behind them, the mountains standing sentinel in the distance, Jonas and Sarah Northwood knew they had found what everyone searches for: true love, a real home, and a life well lived together. The story that had begun with a lost woman and 3 helpless kittens in a storm had transformed into a legacy of love, family, and enduring partnership. Jonas had indeed kept Sarah safe forever, but she had done the same for him, sheltering his heart and giving him a reason to come down from the mountains and become part of the world again. Their children would tell the story to their own children, and their grandchildren would tell it to theirs. The tale of how a mountain man and a brave woman found each other in the wilderness and created something beautiful that would last for generations. It was a love story worthy of the Wild West, of the untamed mountains, of 2 wild hearts that found home in each other. And somewhere in the barn, 3 orange cats, descendants of those original kittens, curled up together in the hay, purring contentedly, living proof that sometimes the smallest creatures lead to the biggest changes, and that love can bloom in the most unexpected places, even in a dark cave during a raging storm. The end of their story was really just the continuation of it, for true love never truly ends. It transforms, it grows, it deepens with each passing year. Jonas and Sarah had learned that lesson well, and they lived it every day, their love as strong at 40-something as it had been at 20-something, perhaps even stronger for having weathered the storms of life together. As they finally stood to go inside, Jonas swept Sarah up in his arms despite her laughing protests that they were too old for such nonsense. He carried her over the threshold of their home just as he had on their wedding night, and Sarah wrapped her arms around his neck, kissing him soundly. "Still strong," she teased, running her hands over his still muscled shoulders. "For you, always," Jonas replied, setting her down gently and pulling her close for another kiss. Their life had been everything they promised each other it would be and more. Through hard winters and bountiful summers, through the challenges of raising children and building a farm, through illness and health, through every storm both literal and metaphorical, they had held onto each other and emerged stronger. The house settled around them as they moved through their evening routine, a comfortable dance of 2 people who knew each other completely. They banked the fire, checked the locks, climbed the stairs to their bedroom hand in hand. As they lay in bed that night, Sarah's head on Jonas's chest, his arm wrapped securely around her, they both reflected on the incredible journey their lives had taken. From that cave to this home, from strangers to lovers to partners to parents to grandparents, they had lived fully and loved deeply. "No regrets?" Sarah asked, her voice sleepy. "Not a single one," Jonas replied, kissing her forehead. "You are my everything, Sarah. You always have been, since the moment I saw you in that cave protecting those kittens like a fierce little mother bear." Sarah smiled against his chest. "And you are mine, my protector, my partner, my love. Forever." "Forever," Jonas agreed, and as they drifted off to sleep, wrapped in each other's arms, the word was both a promise and a prayer, a testament to the enduring power of love. Outside, the mountains stood eternal under the stars, keeping watch over the house and the family within. The same mountains where Jonas had lived alone for so many years, the same mountains where Sarah had nearly died in a storm. Those mountains had brought them together, and they had built their life in the shadow of those peaks, raising their family with the strength and wildness of the land itself. And if mountains could speak, they would tell the story of the mountain man and the woman who saved kittens, of how they found each other and built a love that would outlast even stone, a love that would echo through generations, a love that proved some things are simply meant to be. The story of Jonas and Sarah Northwood became legend in the territory, a tale told and retold of mountain man who found her sheltering lost kittens in a storm, who sheltered her too and kept her safe forever, just as she kept him safe, just as they kept each other safe. Two halves of one whole, together against the world, together in love, together forever.